Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Zevachim. This is our 5th class and we have a lot to do tonight. We are hopefully going to be reviewing Daf 30 through Daf 38. And we have a lot to do. So last week we learned the Mishnah that basically described the concept of pigul, right? Pigul, as we've mentioned last week, is the concept of having improper intent while doing one of the 4 essential services that is part of the sacrifice. So let's just review for a minute. There are 4 essential avodot or services that have to do with an animal sacrifice. We have shchita, which is the slaughtering of the animal, kabbalah, receiving the blood, then holacha, taking the blood to the altar, to the mizbeach, then zrika, which is sprinkling the blood onto the altar. If at any point during one of these actions, the Kohen has in mind, right? Again, this is about intent. It's not about doing the action wrong. It's about intent to do the next action or something else wrong, right? And as we described last time, pigul is either having intent to eat the meat of the sacrifice in the wrong place or in the wrong time. If it's in the wrong place, it becomes invalid, but it does not get karet. It doesn't have as a severe a punishment. If it's about eating the meat or burning the parts of the animal at the wrong time, then it's pigul and it is invalid and the person gets karet. And we discussed at the end of last time that the intent is at any point throughout the service of the sacrifice. So now the Gemara explains that if you had 2 different thoughts during one action, so then that's not pigul, meaning it's only one improper thought at a time, basically. Daf 30 tells us that, again, when we're speaking about combining wrong thoughts or combining 2 different issues, what do we listen to, right? So the Gemara brings the case of tmura. Tmura is when you have an animal that you have designated as a sacrifice. Let's say the animal is an olah, which is a burnt offering. Then you take another animal and you say, you know what, this animal is nicer. I want it to be, instead of the first animal. Now what happens? The sanctity transfers to the second animal, but it stays as well in the first animal, right? It doesn't go away. So the Gemara asks, if let's say I say, this should be instead of an olah, shlamim, right? Those are 2 separate sacrifices. So then which one is it? An olah or a shlamim? Meaning when I make a statement that has 2 different things, what counts? So one opinion is it's the first statement that you made. You made a statement that it should be a burnt offering, an olah, so then it's an olah. Or maybe it's both. Maybe it can be both sacrifices. Or maybe I only go according to the last thing I said, right? If I change my mind, I want chocolate, no, vanilla, right? So do I go by my original request? Do I go by the last thing I said? And that's what the Gemara is discussing. So the Gemara says, well, let's say when you're in the middle of doing shchita, which is the slaughtering, right? That's one action. If you have 2 intents, right? 2 thoughts during that one action, so then it's valid, meaning valid in the sense that it could invalidate the sacrifice. or actually it's a whole process. And then you could have these two intents, or maybe not, right? Again, the discussion is, can I split my thought process while I'm doing one action? Can I have two things in mind at the same time? That's really the discussion. Okay, let's say you think about again an olive's worth, a kazait of right. I'm going to eat the kazait of meat in the wrong place, and I'm going to eat another olive's amount on the wrong time, right? So do those two things combine, or are they independent, right? If they're independent, right, we're going to learn that in order for something to become pigul, again, we don't want it to, but in order for it to become pigul, there can only be one improper thought. As soon as there are more than one improper thoughts or an improper action, that basically it takes it out of the context of pigul, and the sacrifice remains valid. So the question is, if I have two intents, are they do they combine, and now it's not pigul because I had too many thoughts in my head, or each one is seen as individual and they don't combine, and therefore the sacrifice is pigul. So that's the question. So what if, again, let's say the intent is, I'm going to eat this outside tomorrow, right? So in one thought, I thought of two different things, right? The wrong time and the wrong place, but it's still talking about that one piece of meat. So what is that, right? Is it two separate statements, or is it seen as one statement? Again, the practical application is, does it become pigul and then it's completely invalidated and you might get punished, or not? Let's say Daf 31 talks about half a kazait, right? So again, if kazait, an olive amount, is our shiur, it's our minimum amount that is that will count towards this. What if I have half of that amount, but I have half a kazait at the wrong time and half the kazait at the wrong place, right? And then I do another half at the wrong time. So now, do the two halves of the wrong time combine, or because there was the wrong place in the middle, that actually cancels out the intent of pigul? Again, we're trying to create a scenario where the sacrifice would be completely invalidated. So again, the question is, do these things combine or not? Another question, again, let's do it the other way. A half a kazait wrong place, a half a kazait wrong time, and another half wrong time. So now I have the two wrong times, one after the other. Maybe in that case, it does combine, right? So therefore, it will become pigul, and that means that that sacrifice will be invalidated. Okay, let's say, again, let's say someone has the intent to give the meat to a dog tomorrow, right? Again, the sacrificial meat tomorrow to a dog. Is that seen as pigul? And let's say you have intent that the fire should burn this piece of meat tomorrow, right? Is that pigul or not? And we're going to see that, right? Burning, so sometimes it's seen as eating, maybe it's the same idea, or maybe it's not. So the Gemara is going to explain this, that when something is put on the fire to be burnt, that is different than sacrificing that piece, whatever it is, meaning there are certain things that need to be burnt, and they are generally put on the altar. That is, those things that are meant to be placed there are comparable to a person eating, meaning those things can combine. However, just taking a piece of meat that is not supposed to go on the altar, if it does go, that is not seen as the altar eating it, so to speak. Okay, what about the having in mind that two different people will each eat half a kazait? Oh, thank you, Zohar. That's much better. Consuming. I like that. Zohar's saying that I was using the word eating, but consuming is a better word. I like that. Thank you. And Ilanit mentioned Chodesh Tov, so thank you as well. It is Rosh Chodesh, so Chodesh Tov to everybody. Okay. So the Gemara says, actually, having intent for two different people to eat half a kazayit each at the wrong time will combine, right? So if I say, oh, I'm going to give, right, my brother and my cousin this meat, and they're going to eat it in 2 days from now, oh, that is pigul. Those do combine. Okay, so let's say if you have intent to eat something that's usually burnt or consumed on the altar, it does not make it pigul. Again, as I said, it has to be things that generally that is the process that happens. Or according to Rabbi Eliezer, it does make it pigul because again, it's still in the realm of possibility of the sacrifice. And as we mentioned before, eating and burning on the altar do not combine. And with that, we finish the second chapter. Okay, our next Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us if someone who is invalid to do the temple service did shchita, right? So the person slaughtered the animal, it is still valid because as we learned previously, the slaughtering, the shchita, is allowed to be done by a non-Kohen, meaning a regular Yisrael, a woman, a slave, any one of these people can do shchita, and therefore, even if somebody who is impure is tameh, they could do shchita as long as they don't touch the meat or the animal. And because it is a valid shchita, then if that person had the wrong intent while doing shchita, that could invalidate the sacrifice. So it's just very important to recognize, I think it's a little counterintuitive, when we're speaking about intent will only affect the sacrifice if everything else being done is done properly, right? Everything needs to be done properly except for the intent that the person had. If the person also messes something up, other than just the intent, then it's not called pigul. It still might be an invalid sacrifice, but it's not pigul. And again, as we mentioned previously, the implication is if it is pigul, it means that they get a very serious punishment, meaning karet, they get killed by God, and it's very serious. As opposed to invalidating a sacrifice, which is not good, but it's not, it doesn't get the same type of punishment. So it's just important when we're discussing, right, is it pigul, is it not pigul, we have to remember that all the other variables need to stay constant or valid, and only the intent is wrong. If anything else goes wrong, it is not pigul. Okay, let's continue with the Mishnah on Daf 32. if the person, again, if the invalid person collects the blood, right, what we call Kabbalah, then that's not good. But a valid person, meaning a Kohen, a priest who is pure, can go back and collect new blood. And here the Mishnah mentions the concept of dam hanefesh. The blood that is collected is what's called the soul's blood, meaning the blood that comes out right away when the animal is slaughtered. That is the blood that needs to be collected. If a valid person collected the blood, did Kabbalah, and then gave it to somebody who's invalid, so the Mishnah says that's okay, just give it back to the valid person. Let's say the person did Kabbalah with his right hand, which is correct. Then he moved it to his left hand, which is incorrect. No problem, just put it back to the right hand. Let's say he did Kabbalah into a sanctified vessel, what's called a kli sharet, then, which is great, then poured it into an unsanctified vessel, a kli chol. So the Mishnah says, no problem, just pour it back. Let's say after they collected it in the right vessel, the blood spilt on the floor, no problem, just collect it. It's not clear to me how you pick up blood from the floor, but okay, fine. You collect it. Meaning the Mishnah is basically telling us that if you initially do the correct action, then you do something incorrect, you just have to put it back to the way it was, and it does not invalidate the sacrifice. Now, let's say you put the blood, so we did shrita, the slaughtering, we did Kabbalah, receiving. Now let's talk about putting the zrika, putting the blood on the altar. If you put it in the wrong place, you put it on the ramp, or you put it, we're going to learn in a minute that each sacrifice has a certain place that you need to put the blood, either on the top part of the mizbeach, of the altar, or the bottom part of the altar. Let's say you put it on the wrong place, or you brought it into the sanctuary, into the heichal, as opposed to putting it on the outside, right? Or vice versa. So then the sprinkling, the zrika, is invalid, but the sacrifice itself is okay, meaning if you can go back and collect more blood, you can do it over again. So I think it's just, again, very important to recognize that on one hand, things have to be done in a very specific way, but on the other hand, certain things are fixable. I don't know if that's a word, right? But you can go back at certain times, only in specific things, and repeat an action or fix an action, and then then the sacrifice is not necessarily invalidated. Which again, I think is so fascinating, because we just spent, many dapim speaking about if you think the wrong thing, it completely invalidates the sacrifice. But if you put it in the wrong hand, just put it back to the right hand. So it's interesting to think about the lessons behind this in terms of what is reversible and what is not. Okay, so now the Gemara says on daf 32. As we know, right, shchita, slaughtering, can be done by anybody, but from Kabbalah and on, from receiving the blood and on, only Kohanim are allowed to do that. And then there's a discussion about what about an impure Kohen, right? So on one hand, he's a Kohen. On the other hand, he's impure, and impurities are very serious when it comes to the Beit HaMikdash. So the Gemara says, it's not a problem. The person can stand outside of the Beit HaMikdash, right, outside the door, and they could take a really long knife, and they can do the shchita from outside, right? It's not so bad, and they won't, they don't have to be inside. or maybe they do have to be inside. And here the Gemara has a machloket about partial versus full. And the Gemara, I'll explain what that means in a minute. The Gemara compares shchita, the slaughtering of the animal, to smicha. Smicha is literally like to lean on an animal. It was an action done before the slaughtering of the animal, where the owner of the animal, of the sacrifice, would lean on the animal in order to symbolically transfer, right, their guilt, their maybe their sin. What the idea is that the atonement, right, instead of being taken out on our bodies, right, we're saying, please take this animal instead of me. Again, that's me saying this. That's not, but that I think that's the symbolism. We'll talk more about smicha as we continue in this masechet. So smicha needs to be done before shchita, and then there's a discussion: where is smicha done? Is it done right in the courtyard in the azara? And what happened? Right, so the verse says it has to be done lifnei Hashem, before God. So that seems to be saying it has to be in the courtyard, and then it would seem that the person would have to be pure. What if the person is impure? So maybe if the person is only partially in the azara, right? Maybe if the person stays outside and then leans in, maybe that would be okay. And then there's basically a machloket: if you're partially in the courtyard in the azara, is it as if you are completely in the courtyard or not, right? And that has practical applications as well. So again, as we said, right, if an impure person puts his hands into the courtyard, they're going to get lashes because it's as if they entered the courtyard. Right, so is it like as if they entered, and then what do we do? So the Gemara mentions the mitzorah, right? A person who has leprosy, tzarat, needs to get blood placed on their right earlobe, thumb, and big toe, but the person is still tameh. So how does this happen, right? So maybe, right, you can stand outside and have this done, right, to you, even though, right, you're putting some things in, right, so it's partially going in, but it's not seen as being fully in, because that would be problematic. The Gemara says, well, a mitzorah is different, right? A mitzorah has to go into the area, because they need to get this blood application put on, and maybe we can't learn anything from the mitzorah, from this mitzorah, because they have a special dispensation, but it's not necessarily for any person who is impure, right? Whether they're impure, right, tamemet or azav. And the Gemara mentions the concept of, and we saw this, we've seen this previously, right? We know that tamemet, right, if people are, right, for korban pesach, if the majority of the nation is impure from tum'ah from coming into contact with a dead body, if the majority of the nation has this type of impurity, the Gemara says that they can actually bring their sacrifice with this purity, but only with this impurity, tumat met. So the term in the Gemara is that this type of impurity is allowed in a communal or national setting. The big discussion is it completely permissible and therefore it's okay, or is it like suspended, because we know that if you don't bring korban pesach, it is a very severe thing, and therefore only in that case is there a suspension, but not in other cases. So daf 33 tells us again that 1 second. Back to the Metzorah, that, as we said, there's a special dispensation for the person who has leprosy, that they're allowed to stand at the doorway and get the blood put on them. But they cannot do smicha on the animal. Like, that is actually problematic. Okay. So now let's go to the person who is impure, that touches something that is sanctified. There's a machloket if that person gets lashes. If that person gets lashes, the question is it biblical or not? And again, here we're discussing maybe the issue is if an impure person eats a sacrificial meat, but maybe not necessarily touching. And there's a discussion of the difference between touching the animal versus eating the meat. Okay, daf 34. We say that people who are tameh, if they enter the Beit HaMikdash area or they eat sacrificial meat, they both get karet, meaning entering a place and eating something are comparable and will get a very severe punishment. Now, the Gemara also explains that a person will get lashes if they are impure and they eat from sacrificial meat before it was the blood was sprinkled on the mizbeach, on the altar, or maybe it doesn't matter if it happened before or after, meaning the service is complete when the blood is sprinkled on the altar, on the mizbeach. Maybe there are different laws before the blood is sprinkled versus after, or not necessarily, right? There are different opinions. Okay. Next, there's also a discussion if let's say a kohen who is impure eats something, if it's edible or not edible, right? We're going to see that there's going to be a distinction between things that are normally eaten versus things that are not normally eaten. Okay, or maybe the machloket is only when the kohen themselves are impure or tameh, but when the meat itself is tameh, everybody agrees you do not get lashes if you eat that meat. Now, let's say if a person put non-edible parts of the sacrifice into a sanctified vessel, a kli sharet, it actually does become consecrated, comes kadosh, and therefore you would be liable for these things. But these are only kosher animals that are meant to be sacrifices. If they're not meant to be sacrifices, right? If you put the limbs of a non-kosher animal on the altar, one opinion is you would get lashes. Another opinion is you do not get lashes because it's not even applicable. It has nothing to do with the temple service. Right? The Torah tells us that there's an issue with, again, kosher animals, and then we infer for non-kosher animals, or not necessarily. We don't make that inference, and you would not get lashes for a non-kosher animal. Next, if a person who is invalid to do zrika, right? If a person is not allowed to sprinkle the blood on the altar, and they do. So the question is, what happens to the rest of the blood, right? So, right, if there's leftover blood, what happens to the blood? Does this zrika, does this sprinkling of the blood invalidate the sacrifice? Right, as we know, as we said, if you have improper thoughts, right, pigul, that ruins the rest of the blood, meaning if you invalidated the sacrifice with a pigul intent, right, wrong time or wrong place, that invalidates the sacrifice. That invalidates the sacrifice and invalidates the leftover blood. The term for leftover blood is shirayim, right, which literally means like leftovers. So the shirayim become invalidated. Now, that could imply, right, the blood that's still in the kli sharet, in the sanctified vessel. What about the blood that's still in the animal? If you remember, we started this Mishnah discussing, right, maybe if you make a mistake, you just go back and get more blood that's in the animal, right? So the question is, if the wrong person does one of the services, does it completely invalidate the sacrifice, or can you go back and start again? So the Gemara continues, if a person invalidated the blood that was in the vessel, in the kli, and then did zrika, so now, again, as we said, what happens to the blood that's in the animal? So we say, right, the cup of blood that was used, right, let's say you had 2 cups of blood, right? And one of them you used to sprinkle and you did something wrong. What happens to the blood that's in the other cup, right? Does that get invalidated or not? So there's a machloket, right? The verse says you have to spill all the blood. So this is, right, let's say you collected the blood of the animal into 4 cups and you did zrika from all 4 of those cups, right? I don't know why you did that, but you did a little bit from each one. So then you have to spill out the rest of the blood onto the base of the altar. It's called the yisod. Yisod is the foundation, literally, of the altar. And the end of the blood service, after you sprinkle the blood onto the mizbeach, onto the altar, the kohen is supposed to take the rest of the blood that's in the vessel, in the kli, and pour it onto the yisod, onto the foundation of the mizbeach. So the Gemara says that if you did zrika, if you sprinkled from each one of these 4 cups, all the blood in the 4 cups need to go onto the yisod. If you only did zrika from 1 cup, so then that blood from that cup needs to be spilled, but the rest of it does not. So the Gemara explains that the rest of the blood, if you don't need to put it on the altar, on the yisod, on the foundation, it gets poured into what's called the amma. The amma was like I want to say irrigation ditch, but not, I don't like the word ditch, but like a canal, like a little channel that was in the floor of the Beit HaMikdash. And that was basically the drain, right? That's basically the idea, right? You'd pour it down the drain. That's when you pour it in the amma, that's what we would call pouring it down the drain. Pouring it on the yisod is still part of the service. Okay, so here the Gemara again, the Gemara discusses, right, is all the blood put on the yisod, on the foundation, or is some of it poured again in the amma, which is like down the drain? Okay, so we say that again, maybe the blood that's left in the animal goes down the drain, down to the amma. excuse me, and does not have to go onto the altar. Now, Kabbalah, we talked about going back for the original, blood, right? So we say that that is valid. You can go back for the original, but again, depending on the circumstance. So the Mishnah mentioned 3 different cases that if the wrong person does the action, if they did it with the wrong hand, and in the wrong utensil. But if you remember, the initial act was correct. As long as the initial act was the proper act, if in the middle it is now the wrong action, you can go back and correct it. And here, there's a concept that is taught here on daf, what are we on? 34 and 35, which is the concept of dichui. Dichui literally means like pushed away. So the question is, or rejected. The Gemara discusses if something is invalid at the moment, does it remain invalid even if the situation changes? Right? Once it's dahui, it's dahui, or no, at this moment it is invalid, but if I can change it, so let's change it, and now it will be valid, right? That's going to be a machloket we're going to see in this masechet. The question is, right, is there an idea of it's completely rejected or no? And then the Gemara describes that dichui is only when it's out of your control. But in the cases that we mentioned in the Mishnah, that is within our control, right? So wrong utensil, wrong hand, wrong person, I can correct that. So maybe that's not a rejection, right? It didn't become impure. It didn't become, right? It's something that we can change. And therefore, it is not necessarily the same thing. Okay, the Gemara speaks about on Pesach, if you remember a long time ago in Masechet Pesachim, we talked about at the end of the day, if you remember, there's a lot of blood on the floor, there are a lot of people, they take a 1 cup and they fill it with all the blood that's on the floor, and then they sprinkle that blood onto the Mizbeach. And the idea is that, right, if any blood spilt on the floor, so now it's going to get to the Mizbeach. But the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, what if some of the blood was invalid? Now, how are you putting it on the Mizbeach, right? This would show that it's something that you can control, and it shows that there's no dichui, right? Meaning even if it was invalid, you're now putting it on the altar. So the Gemara says, no, on the top of daf 35, what blood was collected at the end of the day? Only blood that was already put into a vessel before it's spilt on the floor. And that would be okay, and therefore it's fine, and it's not really speaking about dichui. Okay, the Gemara describes how this happened. They actually would like plug up the amah, right, the drain, in the azara, in the courtyard, so that all the blood would collect. And right, it was so beautiful, even though I think for many of us, it doesn't sound very beautiful to walk in lots of blood, but I guess the idea is, I don't know, I guess in a time of sacrifices, that would be seen as a beautiful idea. The Kohanim were walking up to their knees in blood. Don't worry, their clothing didn't get dirty because they were on special platforms. So they didn't get dirty, but there was a lot of blood. Okay, next Mishnah on daf 35. Back to intent. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. If you have intent to eat something that is not eaten in general as part of the sacrifice, or to burn something that is not usually burnt, that intent does not invalidate the sacrifice, meaning the sacrifice is still valid. Another opinion is no, it does invalidate the sacrifice, meaning even though you're having intent to do the wrong thing at the wrong time, that still affects the sacrifice. Let's say it's to eat something edible or to burn something burnable, but less than a kazait. Again, that's not pigul, and the sacrifice is still valid. If you have an intent to eat half a kazait and to burn half a kazait, it doesn't combine, if you remember, and therefore the sacrifice is still valid, i.e., it's not pigul. Let's say, again, you slaughter the animal to eat something that's not edible. It does not mess up the korban, and you're not liable for pigul or notar, right? Notar is things that are left over to the next day when they're not valid anymore. So you're not liable for pigul or notar for these things, meaning the things that are not edible, things that are not part of the sacrificial service. If you shecht the animal with intent to eat the placenta or the fetus, that is not pigul. Or you kill the bird sacrifice to eat its eggs, that's not pigul. Or the milk of the animal, to drink the milk of the animal, that's not pigul, and it does not affect the sacrifice. Okay, now, interesting, the Gemara does say that if you did do pigul, meaning you had intent to eat the meat of the sacrifice on the wrong time or in the wrong place, and that animal happened to have been pregnant, then the fetus is prohibited to be eaten, meaning the fetus can become pigul, but having intent to eat the fetus does not make the sacrifice pigul. I know that was a little complicated, but I hope that was understandable. Okay. All right. Hold on one second. Okay. Now, what are these inedible things? So the Gemara explains the wool, the hair, the bones, the horns, right? These things can't become and can't make a sacrifice pigul. And if you leave them over to the next day, it's not notar or tameh. And you're not liable if you take them out of the temple, right? They're not part of the sacrifice. The placenta cannot, again, intent about the placenta cannot make the animal pigul, but it is included if the sacrifice becomes invalidated, right? Becomes pigul. An animal with a blemish, if you put it on the altar, you need to take it down. This is something we're going to learn later on in the Masechet, that on one hand, you're not allowed to put certain things on the altar, but we're going to see that there's a machloket that if, let's say, you did put them on the altar, do you have to quickly take them down, or you can leave it, meaning once it's there and you can leave it. So that's the machloket. We'll see it later on in the Gemara as well. So the Gemara says, well, no, the machloket is only if it has a very small blemish, like in its eye that you can't see. But if the blemish is very clear, then you have to actually take it down. Let's say you brought the wrong animal, right? A female olah, a burnt offering. A burnt offering is supposed to be male, not female. If you brought a female, you have to take it down because that's the wrong animal. Or no, another opinion is you can leave it. Okay, next Mishnah. You do shchita, a person slaughters the animal in order to, and has in mind to leave the blood till tomorrow. or right, to not sprinkle the blood on the altar till tomorrow, or to not burn the emurim, the innards that are supposed to be done that night, and to only burn them tomorrow, or that you had in mind to take these things outside, right, of the Beit HaMikdash, that is invalid, meaning that ruins the sacrifice. Or maybe that does not ruin the sacrifice, and we'll see what the machloket is. If you had intent to put the blood on the ramp, meaning on the wrong place, or in the wrong place, as we mentioned before, on the top or on the bottom, where it's in the wrong area, or on the top of daf 36, that somebody who is impure is going to eat it. Again, you're having intent that someone impure is going to eat the meat, or to break the bones of the Pesach, or to mix the blood of an invalid sacrifice. These things do not invalidate the korban, meaning, we'll see in a minute, these are not strong enough actions. Sorry, you're having intent to do actions that are not essential to the sacrifice, and therefore they can't create a pigul, right? They can't create an invalid sacrifice. Again, if that makes sense, right? Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, it seems counterintuitive. One would think that any wrong thing should invalidate the sacrifice. Now, again, those actions would invalidate the sacrifice, but intent for those actions, not necessarily. Okay, so that's what we're learning now. Again, so then the Gemara summarizes: intent other than wrong place or wrong time does not invalidate the sacrifice, except for sin offering, a chatat, and a Pesach, if they are not done lishma, right? If they're not done for what they are meant to be done, so then that would also invalidate, but everything else would be okay. All right, next. The Gemara talks about notar. Notar is when you leave the meat over to the next day. That's not okay. Again, depending on the sacrifice, certain sacrifices need to be eaten in 1 day or in 2 days, but the notar is after whatever time you had after that. So the verse explains about Pesach and the shlamim, the todah, the Thanksgiving sacrifice is eaten for 1 day and 1 night, and then that verse is expanded to include other sacrifices as well. Right? It says, don't leave it over. Not only can you not leave it over, but it includes intent to leave it over. Again, as we said, we have to make sure that we are right now, most of the things that we've been discussing is intent to do these things, not doing the actual things. Okay. All right. Mixing blood does not invalidate the sacrifice. And if it goes inside versus outside, again, it needs to be in a place where the sacrifice happens, meaning in the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, Rabbi Huda says that if you have intent to leave the blood over, it does invalidate the sacrifice, but it could still become pigul later. Meaning, remember we said pigul, everything else has to be perfect. Rabbi Huda says, well, if you have this intent, then actually you could still become pigul. Or another opinion is no, it could not. It cannot be pigul. And that is the end of the 3rd chapter. Okay, moving right along. Another daf, 2 daf, but I think we can do it. Okay, the Mishnah says anything that is supposed to be put in on the outer altar, meaning we're going to be talking about sprinkling the blood. In Hebrew, it's called matanot dam, even though the word matana is a gift. So I guess it's seen as the gift that we're giving to the altar. Each sacrifice needs to be placed on the altar in very specific areas and certain numbers of, right, we'll see in a minute. So we're going to go through each sacrifice next time. But so for a sin offering, you need 4 matanot, meaning 4 times. For an olah and a shlamim, you need 2 corners. And for Bechor, Maser, and Pesach, just 1. So the discussion now is, Beit Shammai says that if you just put 1 on the Mizbeach, that's enough. And for a, right, so really it should be 2, but if you put 1, that's enough. For a chatat, which is supposed to be 4, 2 is enough. Beit Hillel say, even for a chatat, 1 is enough, meaning there is the right way to do it, and then there is a minimum. If, according to Beit Hillel, if there's at least 1 placing of blood, sprinkling of blood on the Mizbeach, then that is valid. If you put the first one in the right place and the second one, then you had a pigul, right intention. So then you'll still get atonement and the sacrifice is valid. Meaning, because as soon as you put the blood once on the Mizbeach, it's as if you finished. Even though you didn't, there's still more things to go, but essentially you finished, and therefore if you mess up afterwards, it doesn't invalidate the sacrifice. If the first time you had bad intentions, like let's say the wrong time, and the second one, wrong place, that's pigul already. As soon as you put it the first time on, it becomes pigul. The inner mizbeach, right? We learned in the last Masech, and we'll learn again, sacrifices that are supposed to go inside in the sanctuary, in the heichal, they need all 4 sprinklings. And if you miss 1, you do not get atonement. And if you put 3 in the right place and 1 in the wrong place, it is invalid, right? So the verse basically teaches that 1 is enough. That's the Gemara. Daf 37 tells us that, right, the remaining blood needs to be spilled onto the yisod, onto the foundation. Right, there's pouring of the blood and there's sprinkling of the blood, and you need both of those actions. The Gemara discusses the different sacrifices and where they need to be placed. And then we go back to Beit Hillel, where he learns that even for a sin offering, 1 sprinkling is valid, as opposed to Beit Shammai. Right, and they basically read the verse. It says the word kranot. Kranot are the horns, the corners of the mizbeach. It says it kranot, which means 2. It says it 3 times. So 4 times to teach that 4 times it needs to be placed on. But right, you have 6. 4 is what you need to do, and 2 is the minimum. That's according to excuse me, to Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel say no, because if you look at the word, if you look at the word kranot, the way it's written in the Torah, it's what's called chaser. It's missing a vav. So really you can read it karnat, 1. I'm so sorry, 1 second. Okay, so because it's written missing a vav, so then it only counts singular. So twice it's singular, so that's 2, plus double, which is another 2, which makes it 4, right? So 4 corners, 3 are for the mitzvah, and 1 is the minimum that you need. And the Gemara continues on Daf 38, right? Other places where we learn the number of things based on the words that are written, right? Sukkah, right? Sukkot, how many walls you need for your sukkah. We learned that, right? That you only need 2 full walls plus a small wall. Totafot for the tefillin, right? You need 4 compartments, not 5. And the Gemara discusses how we learn each one of those things. As we mentioned, the sacrifices that go into the sanctuary, into the heichal, those need all 4 applications onto the altar in order to get atonement. And they need to be placed in the right place. The Gemara talks about on Yom Kippur as well, where you have sprinkling of the blood, right? 1 up and 7 down, and how you need all of these sprinklings are essential. Now, the Gemara goes back to the chatat, the sin offering, right? 3 of the placement of the blood are not essential, meaning 1 is the minimum, and as soon as that's done, it's great. But right, so again, let's say we'll call it 1 plus 3, right? 1 needs to be done perfectly. What about those other 3? So on one hand, they're not essential. On the other hand, they're important. So how do we understand them? So the Gemara says that those 3, on one hand, right, they can't be done in certain ways, right? So on one hand, they're like the first one. On the other hand, they're not. In what way? So they're like the first one because they can't be done outside of the Beit HaMikdash. They can't be done at night. It can't be done by somebody who's invalid. It can't be done, it needs to be done from a kli sharet, right, from a sanctified vessel. It needs to be placed on the proper place. It needs to be done with the finger. And if that blood gets on the clothing of the Kohen, he needs to wash his clothing. So, and shiraim, and it affects the leftover blood. So in all of those things, it's like the first thing. However, if, let's say, the owner of the sin offering dies in between application number 1 and number 2, then you can still put 2, 3, 4 on the altar, even though the person died, right? We know that a sin offering, if the owner dies, it's invalid. But because we already did the first application, you can continue with the rest. It doesn't invalidate it. Also, if the blood splashes in the middle of the zrika, so then you have to clean the clothing. But if it's after the zrika, you do not have to wash the clothing. Or right, the shiraim of the blood, if you take the leftover blood outside, you would be liable for that as well. Whew. Okay, with that, we finish this week's plus, and I'm happy to, if anybody has a question for a minute or two, I'm happy to answer any questions, comments, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we will pick it up next week on Wednesday, Be'ezrat Hashem. Yes. Comments, questions?
Hi. In the chat that I wanted to ask you, you said about smicha. Is that similar to what we do in kaparot?
Similar, yes. Similar, yeah.
Okay.
Right. The idea is that we're transferring the guilt onto that animal, so it is similar, yes.
Okay, and would this be a good word for it, as an aqueduct?
I mean, I think aqueduct is like what it looks like. But an amma could be anything that takes water from one place to another, right? So like if you were going to irrigate your field, you would use an amah. So it's not necessarily an
Right.
aqueduct in the sense of, how what I'm saying? Like an aqueduct could
not
be an
a,
amah, but not every amah is
not
an
a construction.
aqueduct. Exactly.
Right. It's right. It's not a construction. It's just the way for it
Correct.
to sort of
Correct.
like it's like a marzev, like a gutter of some sort.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, those were my questions. And the first
Okay.
as you weren't feeling well.
Thank you, Bezrat Hashem. Thank
And
you.
I am hailing from Budapest right now.
Wow. Enjoy. I hope you're enjoying.
Yeah. Today we went to Shaila's team.
It's an amazing place. I had to actually go there physically to find out the fact that everybody else knows there's two cities, Buda and Pest. I did not know till I got there.
Yeah.
Right, me neither.
Thank you, Rabbanit. It was wonderful. It sounds like you have a cold, so try to take it easy, okay? And Chodesh Tov.
I do. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for your wonderful shir, and you did again a marathon worth of material, and it's amazing. You ended exactly on time with a minute left for questions. That's phenomenal. Thank you, and gesundheit, and I hope you feel better soon. Thank you for doing all of that on our behalf while you weren't feeling well. Even more remarkable. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's good to be able to teach. Bezrat Hashem, I hope next week I will feel much, much better. Bezrat Hashem. All right. Chodesh Tov, everyone.
I had one other question. I had one other question. You had said that if the person had taken it in his left hand instead of his right hand, but what happens if the person is left-handed?
It's a great question. So we're going to learn that, and not to offend any lefties, because I'm also a lefty. But it is seen as
it's not it's just a different.
It's a movement. It's seen as meaning proper worship is done with the right hand. And if the Kohen cannot do the avodah properly with his right hand, then he's not allowed to do the avodah. So I think that, it could be that in those days, they, like in the old days, like my parents always described, like, they used to train the lefties to use their right hand. So it could be that maybe that was something that they did when they were little, to make sure that their right hand was either the dominant hand or strong enough. But we're going to discuss if it's seen as a mum or not.
Yeah, and in the ancient Near East through to today, eating left hand was used for toileting. And that's where a lot of the perceptions about left and right come from as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't think I knew that.
That's a Muslim tradition.
It was our tradition as well.
Now, left hand is what you
even
should
now
use for toilet.
Yeah, Muslim tradition today. They're very careful.
Yeah, they still do that. Did that as well. It's documented. It was pan-Middle Eastern, pan-Near Eastern actually, and into Africa as well. So yeah, it was very well established. Muslims carried it on because they didn't get exiled and things like that.
Wow.
They were still here.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see it today.
Wow.
I remember somebody went to shake my hand that was a Muslim. And I said, "Oh, I've got something sticky in my hand. My left hand's clean." I said, "No, they took my right hand very specifically, even though it was the sticky hand, to show that they were trying to show me that they were honoring what I just said, and they wanted to show it by taking my right hand."
It's the same in India. It's the same in India. Eat with
India
the
as well,
right
yes.
hand and toilet with the left. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Have a good night,
But
everyone.
interesting that tefillin, the left hand put it on the right hand. So, there is
It's considered closest to the heart.
allowance.
It's because the tefillin is considered closer to the heart. It's considered the heart. They thought the heart.
Yeah, but
was more
lefties put it on their right hand. So
yes, they do.
Yeah. All right.
Yes, they do.
Excellent.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.